Okay, my name is Corey Pinkston.
I'm Amber Smith.
I'm Soraya Shepherd.
I'm Jesse Spendlove. I'm karate on the thing, I guess, but yeah.
Okay, so this week we're talking about the consequences of redefining marriage. I guess we'll go through some of these questions that are on here, but I feel like there's a lot more to talk about than what these questions are giving. Honestly, I feel like the reading had so much in it that we can discuss, but we'll go through a few of these. How might understanding how people develop within multiple contexts give you more compassion and understanding of those who are promoting ideas what are hurtful to men, women, and children? I think I meant that or hurtful.
Well, let me see if I answered, if that was one of the, I feel like, come on, computer, work for me. There's always, so I had answered this question during the readings or whatever, and I said that it's important to recognize that not everyone lives the ideal lifestyle, recognizing that different experiences and systems shape people growing up. It should make it so we are less judgmental, especially if we have never gone through that particular scenario. So, like a person that was raised in a horrible situation growing up where say the parents were married, but then one of the parents was super abusive or whatever, and so it totally failed. That person may say oh, well, all marriages involve abuse and stuff like that, and so it's I don't think it's that great of a thing. And so I feel like there are some people that truly believe that because of how they grew up, and how they were raised, and how the media influenced them, and just the location where they lived. Because you go to the East Coast, I feel like it's more, at least in certain areas, it's more liberal, I guess. And then you have okay, then you have California on the west side too. But I lived in Kansas for a time, and they're the most conservative, just chill people ever. They're yeah, whatever, this, that. And so I feel like where you grow up as well also has on what you think about things like marriage, or different things like that. So
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know what much more I can add to that, but I think that when we understand that there's so many different factors that can play into somebody's life and how they are shaped, then I think it can help us have more compassion towards them. We don't have to judge them that they have differing points of views or opinions than us, because they might have been raised that way. Whereas us, I mean, I don't know about all of you guys, but I was raised in the church, and so I obviously have certain opinions because my parents taught me the the gospel in my home, and I always watched General Conference. And so I think that even just being a member of the church my whole life, that has definitely shaped me into who I am today. Whereas other people have other circumstances and experiences that shape them. And so we can't really judge who people are because there's so many different factors that play into who they are. And with Bronfenbrenner's ecological model, there's the government plays a role in who we are, the media, and so there's so many different things that I don't know if it's fair that we take people who have differing opinions than us and kind of push them aside because we don't know why they believe those things. I mean, it doesn't mean we have to agree with them. It can just give us more compassion in listening to why they might think that way.
I think also that I like the point that you brought up about like being raised in the church and stuff, because like I feel like that in most cases gives a more positive outlook on life, um, because of the hope of that we have of the gospel, knowing that like the crap that we go through now isn't ultimately gonna be there in the hereafter. And so I think a lot of people that don't have that upbringing, or that just like don't go to church at all, like I feel like not that they have a more negative outlook on life, but just like they don't, because they didn't grow up with those influences, they don't see the same importance of these things. So
Yeah, I feel like, well, they just don't have the same hope that we have because they don't see what we see. And I think too, like kind of what Corey said was like it's important to listen to what they have to say too. So, along with not judging what they have to say, but if we expect them to listen to our viewpoints and what we have to say, we should genuinely listen to what they have to say to really understand why they believe what they do. Um, that kind of leads into the next question. So, what we were talking about, which of the systems between the chrono, macro, exo, meso, and micro do you feel more comfortable in your advocacy efforts? And then the next question too is, which do you feel is most needed? I can start with that one. I think I said, oh my gosh, I put it in my notes and I'm not going to remember anything. I feel like I am more comfortable even in the like micro meso area. And I think it's just because it's what's around me. And part of me almost feels like I have a hard time because I feel like there's arguments for which is the most important in almost every aspect. But for me, if you look at it on the smaller levels, if we're teaching people at a young age, which is where they're mostly in those levels, instead of like the expanded ones, if you're teaching them young, once they're being more influenced by media and government, and by the time they get to that point, if we've already taught them principles and, if they've already learned those things in the more like, in the meso micro systems, I feel like that will influence the larger systems. So I guess I feel like it's more important to start there, and then as it expands out, it will influence that as it grows, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I think that I like what you said because you mentioned that when they're younger, they're more influenced by what's around them. And I think that's totally true because I was thinking about what historical events have really influenced my life, I guess. And I don't think I even understood what was going on in the world until I was older. But because I was taught when I was younger, so basically, Prop 8, I was in high school. We've talked about this before, but because I was in high school, I understood a little bit more. But I think that if it had happened right now, where I'm older and I have a family, I would have been even more prepared um, for that and not letting it really influence me, or using my views to help promote what I believe was true. And so I think that um, for me, I would definitely be more comfortable advocating in my own, even just like the local community. But from watching that video, I don't remember her name. I think Kelly. So watching that video, I think that it gave me a little bit of confidence knowing that I can kind of work my way up to where she's at. So maybe if I am in a restaurant and I see something, an inappropriate movie, I can write an email, and I would probably be comfortable doing that. I would not be comfortable going to the UN international level and advocating just because I'm not that educated yet. And so I think that that takes a role too, is becoming educated and working our way up to the higher levels of the um, ecological model or system, I guess. But I think that each um, each system is important, like Amber said. I just don't know if we are all ready to work in the higher systems, but that doesn't mean that they're not important. We just have to make sure that we're educated so that we can be effective advocates at those higher levels.
I think I'm more comfortable with the micro setting as well. Well, I agree with you all that they're all each important in their own way, but it kind of brings to my mind that scripture by small and simple things. And I think that if each of us try to do small and simple things in our own community, in that it would not only help our community but also influence the larger portions of the systems.
And I really like what you said, Amber, about like teaching, making sure like the children are taught like, you know, the way that they're supposed to be brought up and stuff. But then, and so like in that aspect, like me personally, I'm like, yeah, microsystem is definitely where I'm most comfortable because I get to choose who I associate with, all this stuff. But I also feel like not necessarily that it's the most important because I do feel like what we learn in the home is the most important. But I feel that like, and not that I personally would be able to do it right now, like Corey was saying, but like I feel like the exosystems and even like the macro systems, like the government and stuff, they make the policies that then like trickle down into the school systems and, you know, all of those kinds of things. And so with that video with Kelly, that I thought that it was really neat that she like was able to work at that level. And so I feel like while I will probably never make like, you know, go to the UN and share it, you know, as something or other, like even just like the local like city councils that where we're at, like I feel like that is a good area to target because like not everyone raises their children correctly, I guess. And I know like everyone has their own parenting styles and all that stuff, but that like not everyone teaches their children the ideal, especially the ideal that like we teach about and stuff. And so, and a lot of it is because like sometimes maybe the parents just don't know, like they don't know how to teach it or they're just not educated about certain things. And so I feel like by doing like at a local like community type level or even maybe like a state level if you're feeling super ambitious, like that can help like raise awareness for different issues that are going on in the family. And I feel like that would help a lot of people. Yeah, just bring awareness to those people and help them want to do more. So
Definitely. I feel like we talked a lot about Kelly's video there, which kind of answered the next question of how it helped us to understand the ecological approach. I feel like, I don't know, so the last question on here, we can go back to Kelly's video too if you want. But so it said, what historical events and factors can you think of that have contributed to the disintegration of the family? Does anyone have any thoughts on that one?
I thought about what Kelly said in her video actually about, I don't remember all the specific names and stuff, but in like Michigan or some state like that, there was this group that was trying to, I don't know if it was anti-family or something, I don't know, like, but to try to like push it there, and like they flat out rejected it. But then they went to the UN, and she talked about how a lot of in particular are more like not ahead of us, but like a lot of those countries like legalized gay marriage even way before we did. And so that group recognized that, hey, like the United Nations or whatever, like all of these other countries are already doing this thing that we believe in. And so by kind of like influencing it on that level, then it will kind of bring more awareness to the United States. And so I feel like that could just be like like one example. I don't even remember what it was that the topic was, if she even mentioned it, but just that just kind of stood out to me that like, oh, they're not going to listen. I'm going to go to somewhere up higher or something. And so I think that probably definitely had a big influence on different policies and ways of thinking in the United States.
Okay, I feel like let's talk more about just what we thought of from Kelly's video. Like, so I guess I could start. I kind of feel like, I don't know, whenever I was watching it, the whole thing was just slightly mind-blowing to me, I guess, in a way, because it was like, oh my gosh, like people really do this. And like you were saying with the whole Michigan thing, it's because they know that the UN and the rest of the world seems to be setting the groundwork for what eventually seems to trickle into everything else. And I think something else that I thought was really sad is how sneaky they are with their language. That they'll use words and the way that they phrase it. Because half the time I was reading through the CRC thing, I was like, I caught on to some of it, and a lot of it, like for me, was more of like, okay, it sounds like they're taking away freedoms. Sounds like they're trying to control the countries who enter into this. Sound like, but I didn't get all of it, and I think a big part of the reason why I didn't is because I don't know the language. But then whenever she was talking about it, and she was saying, you know, they use this word, but it actually means this, and then she shows this like book that was like this thick, full of the different language within there. I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's insane. And can you imagine going to something like that and having to understand everything that they're saying without being pulled in by how manipulative their wording is, because they're trying to make it sound so good so that you don't see what they could really mean, or ways that it could be twisted, or judges can pull in this or this from that to affect law.
And what she was saying, like a lot of the countries where English was their second language, like they may not have fully understood like what exactly they were meaning by it. And I definitely was reading through that thing. I was like, well, a lot of this is like really good. Like, yeah, you know, this is that. But then I also caught on. But so until I watched the video, I was like, I don't know if this is supposed to be good or bad, because like I don't know what's going on. But it was actually on the link is what the CRC says, and then like you can click the link to read it or whatever. A couple of links down on that website, there was like a children's version of what it said. And so I thought that was actually, it was over it. It was like explaining it like how a child would understand. In most cases, some of it I was like, I don't think a child would necessarily understand that. But yes, the crafty, sneaky languages and stuff. And so what Kelly was doing, what they did with those countries and helping them understand, or the leaders of those countries and helping them understand exactly what it was saying, I think it helped promote the awareness on their part.
Something that I was thinking about, so at first when I read the CRC, I I was wondering like why didn't the US sign this? Because I thought that it sounded kind of good, like it like was leading to good ideas, protecting children and their rights. Like of all the countries, why didn't we sign this? And then like Jesse said, until the video, I didn't really understand what to what extent um or how many hidden things there were in there. And so like she said that whoever didn't uphold every single part of the treaty or whatever it was, they were sorry, I'm changing my daughter's diaper. um, um, so whatever they didn't uphold, if they didn't uphold their part, they were given less funds, and um, and so I think that I'm grateful that we have people from our country there that really understand these things, because even though at first I thought like really we didn't sign this, but they're actually protecting us. And so I think that um it's nice that we have people like Kelly who can share this information with us, because if I hadn't watched that video, I would have just thought that this CRC or the treaty was such a great thing, and probably would have, I mean, not that I have people to talk to high up, but I probably would have talked to my family about it and shared my ideas with them, or like what I think is good about it, not understanding exactly what it meant. And so I think that it's really helpful to have um, people share with us what they know about it, which then made me think, okay, well, if I know something about a certain topic, then why wouldn't I share that knowledge with others? And so then it made me think of how important it really is to be an advocate and take what I know and share it with others, because you never know how it might influence them. Um, this is kind of sounding like a gospel thing, but relating it back to the gospel, it's, I guess that's really why it's so important to be a missionary, because we know something is true and we want to share it with others, and we know it will make them happier. And so with this too, um, if we know something that will protect families and children, then why not share it with others?
It kind of reminds me of, it was like an object lesson way back when I was a kid. There were these two boxes, and one of them was wrapped up in like this plain paper, didn't look really attractive or anything. And then you had a present that was wrapped up in like the most beautiful wrapping paper, had a bow on it. It was beautiful. And as a kid, we were told, okay, pick the present you want. One of them has a good gift and one of them has a bad gift. And all these kids would go for the gift that was just beautiful. And in it had the bad gift. And I think that's how the adversary works. If he'll look at something and make it look like the most beautiful thing, the most wonderful thing. Like somebody, like you said, I can't talk today. But like the CRC, it looks like on the outside it's fantastic, it's wonderful, but it's that pretty little present that has the bad gift inside. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, that does. And that totally reminds me, I'm taking an institute class right now, and my teacher is like fantastic. And just like in relation to the CRC and then what Kelly was explaining about it, is that like said, she was talking more about spiritual things, but I think it also applies to stuff like this as well, is where you can be reading something or listening to someone speak, and then it just sounds great, and then like that one comment will be made, or that one little clause in the thing will, and then like you get like a twinge of the spirit is what she called it, where like you'll be sitting there and you'll just be like, I don't know if that's entirely right. And she was telling us, she's like, and when you feel that, like you need to roll with it, because a lot of times, like especially when it comes to like listening to the spirit, we're like, was that a spiritual prompting or was that just my head type of thing? But like how whatever you feel like, I don't know if that's entirely correct, like it has truths mixed in there, but I don't know like how true that is, like that we need to listen to that. And I feel like that is a good thing that we can do, like when looking at like future documents or whatever, because it's inevitably going to happen. And like, yeah, so yep.
I think those are great points. So I really kind of want to talk about the reading too, because I feel like that was a lot, and none of the questions really revolved around the reading. So I'm just gonna I'll let you guys start with it. But what were some thoughts or feelings or things that you got out of the reading from our book?
Let me just see him. Let me see him.
I'm just gonna be honest, straight up. I like went to bed early last night with a fever, and I feel like crap. Like I literally got out of bed like half hour before, so I have not read the chapter yet, so I won't have anything. Chapter goes, just so you guys know. But yeah.
Also, so I didn't get that book. I got 2 books in a packet, and one of them is The Sacred Duty, and they gave me another book. So I don't have the book that we were supposed to read from either. But let me see if I don't know if I can answer the questions without having read it. Amber, did all of these questions have to do with what was in that book?
So the questions that we had for this meeting, I don't know. So this is, I guess, why I was kind of confused, because I read all the questions. We already talked about all the questions that were on the instruction page for the meeting. And none of them really had to do with the reading. So that's kind of why I thought, because the reading was pretty good. And so maybe I'll just talk about some stuff I got out of it. So when I was reading it, oh gosh, sorry, my child's like playing with the water bottle and I'm convinced he's gonna spill it everywhere.
Give me that.
So they talked a lot about, I don't know, so we already read chapter 1 from it, and this was chapter 2. And there were videos that went along with it too, and I watched the one video and then half of the other one. But it's basically how the law is changing the definition of marriage and how they're redefining what marriage actually is. And it talked a lot about, well, if that's okay, then why isn't it okay to have they call it a throuple, which is 3 people. And my child's telling me to be quiet. And saying basically, so here's what I was reading it just before finishing it up, and some of the stuff. So there's talk out there of seriously people are writing about things like this, and a lot of it's coming from other countries, and it's in major news articles and such. Things like a wet lease is an idea that's been thrown out there. Like, let's have the leases of marriage instead of, so it's like more like a rental agreement. Then divorce won't be so messy, and then you can up your lease if you want to. And like, there's serious things that people are talking about. And the other thing that I got out of it.
Mama,
What?
let me see him.
Okay, he wants to see. The other thing that I got out of it that was really frustrating to me, I was just getting frustrated with the chapter, honestly, with the things that people are saying, and is that I feel like they're also trying to redefine sex, and they're trying to redefine the importance of it and the sacredness of it, and they're basically saying, let's take out the emotions of it, because they're saying that there's so many people who say that you should allow within marriage that if you just let your partner be sexually free, that they can just, have that with anybody else, and you just at home will have like the emotional part of it and the caretaking part of it, that's just fine. But that they can go seek the sexual part of it elsewhere, because how is it that you expect someone to be to have all their sexual needs fulfilled with just one person the rest of their lives? Like, these are real things that people say. And so I feel like they're literally just trying to take all the emotions out of sex, which is actually impossible. You can't. No matter what, it is natural that whenever you're having sex with someone, you're going to have an emotional bond with them. But they think that they can take that out, that sexual part out of a relationship, the emotional part out of it, so that you're just purely having those physical needs met. And that was just kind of driving me crazy. And then the other thing, and this was just something I was thinking about, was I feel like, and this is speaking outside of abuse or neglect or adultery or anything else negative that happens within marriage, but I've never understood why a spouse could be treated like anything other than family. And that's what I feel like a lot of people do whenever they think, oh, I just fell out of love with my husband, so I'm going to get a divorce. And that's always confused me, because I feel like, one, you can't divorce your kids. So what are you going to say? Oh, I just don't love my son today, so I'm not going to be his mom anymore. Like, you don't do that. You figure it out, and there's going to be times, I'm sure, when we're going to be angry at our children or whatever, and we don't just divorce them. And I feel like we work through things whenever it's our siblings or our parents, and I feel like marriage should be taken a lot more seriously. And that your spouse should be, your priority even over your children in most cases. And I guess I just have a hard time whenever people talk like this because I feel like marriage is so incredibly important and they're just whittling it down to this thing that doesn't actually matter. So the chapter was just, it was a lot of information that I was just like, oh my gosh, just stop.
Yeah, that I wish I could have read it. I think that it's just heartbreaking to see how you can, well, because we know that the family is the most important thing and we should treat it like that. And it's just heartbreaking to see it be torn apart and changed. And so I think that when, um, let's see, because I have the questions from the reading. I don't know if they'll help, but I was just thinking that one of them said, do you think understands these consequences or simply writes them off as conspiracy theory with no founding? Um, I mean, I don't know if I can answer this right without having read it, but from what I think is that they society really doesn't understand what's going on. I think they see all of these changes as maybe part of um, like evolution, I guess, where it's just something that used to be in the past and we're just evolving towards something new. And so what they are listening to the media and just the world around us, I guess it's the adversary, we know. And they're just taking what's being thrown at them and seeing it as new truth instead of questioning whether it's right or not. And I'm just so grateful that we have the gospel because we know that God is never going to change. Like the family is never going to be bumped down on the scale. It's always going to be the most important thing, and we need to fight for it. And we need to fight for marriage and our children. And um, I don't think that the world understands how important it is or what effect it's going to have on us later by allowing us um, to make all of these changes or to, like Amber said, to take all of the emotion out of sex and love. They and I think that's what we are supposed to be learning from this is that we have this truth and we have this knowledge and we have to go out and share it with others because they're just going to hurt themselves and live in sadness if they don't understand exactly how important the family is. Um, so I wish I could have read the chapter, but I guess I need to find a different book.
It kind of reminds me, sorry, my allergies are a complete wreck. I happen to be in the part of California where I'm surrounded by fire, so everything's smoky. The other day, my mom and I were having this conversation, and she was kind of in this like deep funk where she felt like she had not accomplished anything. She was saying how she's barely getting her degree. She's only raised her kids. She had a failed marriage, which had no part on her. That was totally my dad. And she felt like that she hadn't accomplished anything. And I looked at her and I said, well, are you thinking about it on society's point of view, or are you thinking it on the church and the gospel's point of view? Because the gospel is so centered on the family, and you've raised your family. And my brother and I are doing great. We're doing fantastic. And you raised us right. So you've accomplished something that's just the highest priority in the church. And it kind of just made her a little bit no longer in that deep funk. And then we talked about dinner. So, you know.
Yeah, thanks. That was a good thing to say. Sorry, made me slightly emotional. Because I get in that funk a lot. It's hard. It's really hard to not feel like that. So I feel like, is that good on time, guys, because I don't actually know what we're supposed to, how long we're supposed to go.
Yeah, we're good.
I think so, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I guess we can go ahead and do the summary now.
Okay, so as a warning, my pen died halfway through, and I am terrible at summaries, so I vote not for me to do it again. We talked about the consequences of marriage and that people develop differently, and because not everyone has the same ideal lifestyle, we cannot be judgmental in their circumstances and influences on how they see the world. There are different factors that shape people's lives, and we can't judge people due to those factors. We have different systems, and most of us are pretty comfortable with the micro and meso, the smaller levels, and those smaller levels will help influence the larger levels. We need to teach the children the truth and the right things so that they can help influence also the larger systems and larger levels. We can work with the community and to help the kids with parents who don't know how to teach their children, either from the lack of education or just they don't know. Some people will think that the United States are kind of behind because other countries have, for example, legalized gay marriage while we hadn't for a long time. And because of this, they seem to think that we're behind times and behind schedules or behind lifestyles. Policies and laws are passed because we don't understand the language. There's crafty language that can cause bad policies and bad laws. It helps to have people who know what they're saying and know about what they're talking about to help influence others and to understand what is really going on. Sometimes the pretty present has the bad items. You can be reading or listening to someone who is great, but you can get that spiritual twinge that might give you the feeling that what they're saying isn't exactly correct, and we need to act on those. Right now, the laws are trying to talk about changing the definition of marriage, and people are trying to redefine everything that marriages involve, including being intimate. We need to work things with our spouse and have them be high priority instead of thinking about a lease in marriage. Family is the most important thing, and society doesn't know what's really going on with everything. They're just accepting half-truths. There's my summary.